Welcome to the Association's Futures Podcast, brought to you by Association Activision. We ask you to join us to discuss the future of the Association's community. How can we build and focus on the many futures we will see during these disruptive times? Let's get started with today's guest.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another broadcast of Association Futures. Today's guest is Rick Burt, CAE. Rick joined the Association of Women's Health, Obstetrics, and Neonatal Nurses, AWON, in 2020 as Director of Membership Development. He currently serves as Vice President for Membership and Volunteer Engagement and a member of the executive team that leads the organization's membership, customer service, component relations, development, and volunteer engagement efforts. With close to 2 decades of experience in professional association management, Rick is a seasoned nonprofit professional with expertise in leadership development and membership services. In 2023, Rick was honored with the ASAE Professional Performance Award, further solidifying his commitment to excellence in our profession. He achieved his Certified Association Executive, CAE, credential and was recognized among Association Forum's distinguished 40 under 40 professionals in 2018. I've long passed the 40 mark, Rick. Rick is also a proud alumnus of the ASA Diversity Executive Leadership Program, better known as DELP, class of 2016-18. An active contributor to our field, Rick has been a dedicated ASA volunteer for an extended period and currently serves as chair-elect of the CAE exam committee. Rick holds a master's in executive leadership from Christian Brothers University in Memphis, Tennessee, and a bachelor's in history from Georgia State University, Atlanta, Georgia. Please join me in welcoming Rick to the podcast. Hi, Rick.
Well, hello, Michael. Nice to meet you, and thanks for that wonderful introduction. I'm looking forward to our discussion today. And quite frankly, when you read that bio back to me and I start thinking about it, I'm like, wow, you really start connecting the dots of what you've done to lead up to this point. And so it's always a treat and sometimes surprising to say, oh, wow, there's been a lot of ground covered.
There's nothing wrong with letting people know what you've done, Rick. Nothing at all. Nothing at all. Hey, Rick, you've worked in this membership field, the side of that association about sustainability and survival of the organization for a very long time. What has changed after the pandemic in this fast-paced change that we're finding in the new 21st century? What do you see as the evolution of membership development in this new ecology?
Yeah, I would say I think there's a couple different things that come to mind when we think about what change we've seen as a result of, the world going through the pandemic and still working through some of that now as we, embrace living with it. And I think one of the first things that's impacting membership for associations is the prevalence now of remote work. So I think there are 3 different things in there, remote work being one, the importance of leaning in and embracing or at least enhancing online communities. And then the third, I would think, would be around how do we enhance customer engagement? And I like to potentially now think about how we interchange customer and member when we think about associations, because I want to look at it in terms of we have an opportunity to grow our customer base. Those may become members, but sometimes we have people that just consume and stay in that customer column. So those are the 3 areas, I think. And to talk a little bit about that, I would say we focus in on the fact that, I read some statistic recently where, remote work has increased almost, tenfold since that. And that impacts all industries. There's some, obviously, that can embrace that more so than others. But at the same time, that, I believe, intersects directly with our future members' mental health, one, and truly to the extent that we're at a place where there is the blending of home and work life so much. And as a result, that line that used to be that division of I'm commuting to the office or I'm commuting home, that's really gone now. And as a result, I believe that impacts how we as associations need to develop engagement strategies. Where is it that we are then meeting our members where they are and understanding what they may be anticipating they need moving forward? So I think that's where the enhancement of the connection piece with the online communities may become a space, or at least a ground where we can truly invite others to collaborate in ways that hasn't been facilitated in that medium. You know,
Well,
previously.
no, go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's a nice way of putting it with the three categories like that. And you were going to add something, and I interrupted. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Go
no,
ahead.
no, not at all. I was on a roll. I think, and where I was going with that is, where we used to always get that in in-person engagements. Now it's trying to develop what additional ways we can get that same, or at least mimic that environment of being in person. And I'm not saying that that means in person is going away, because I believe, based on things that I've been reading and what I've been seeing, is that in-person engagement is starting to come back with a vengeance, because we all need that connection. We need that human connection to understand and to make sure that we keep ourselves grounded. So that's really kind of how I would frame looking at those things that are impacting member development right now. And like I said in my intro, I think the third one would be thinking about how we enhance those engagement opportunities and thinking beyond just member, because we have folks that, depending on your type of association you might work in, there are folks that are going to be just consumers. And that means they may never check that membership box, but we still have a duty to represent them, particularly in a specific industry. I think about, the space that we work in at A1. We have three specialties: women's health, obstetric, and neonatal. And, as an association, we have about 25,000 members. But the Department of Labor statistics tell us that there's about 360,000 people in the US that are in those specialty areas. So we have a duty, even though they may not have checked that membership box, to be able to advocate on their behalf, understand that what our practices are that we're putting forward for healthy, evidence-based protocols, they also are taking part in, because they're interacting maybe in their hospital or their healthcare setting.
One of the very interesting things that you just outlined is this difference between people who, like you said, check the box and become members, and those who are part of the profession, in your case, but may not check the box. We still have something to offer them in the association community. And I would say back to you that that's a pretty unusual perspective. A lot of people in our industry, if they don't check the member box, they don't care who they are, kind of routine. So I think just by outlining that the way you did, you're setting up something that wasn't the way we used to do things.
Yeah, and you're right. And I think that's what has really changed for me, Michael, as I look at how the pandemic has disrupted. And it's like we may need to do a paradigm shift as association professionals, because, there's a potential where you tap out at a certain level. And so how do we continue to expand that and invite more people in?
Yeah. So I want to delve into a little bit of the DEI issue. I mean, statistically, we know that the demographics of our society, they're just turning, and anybody that can't read the numbers just, is refusing to look at reality as far as I'm concerned. So considering that, about making DEI real and actionable and sustainable, and not just another task or, some little program that we do, what recommendations might you have that will help us in accepting the societal, emotional, and long-standing impact of history as we navigate the DEI issues?
Yeah, I think some of the things that I have seen that work well most recently, and I want to pause first and really acknowledge that I believe the term DE&I has become hijacked in many respects. Particularly, folks have leaned into the negative connotations surrounding the terminology, and that's unfortunate because in order for the society to continue to grow and for us to continue to make an impact as associations and just as citizens, we have an obligation to recognize, hear those that are around us that may be different than us. And I think that goes beyond just what we might see physically, but also how we embrace in conversations around different perspectives. And I believe all of that plays into DE&I and moving that forward in a way that where we all become uh, more inviting, but also in a way to where we encourage others that may be viewing something differently, and we invite that in. That way we grow. So I think some things that, as an association perspective, to think about would be certainly having to buy in from leadership, board leadership, senior staff leadership, as a way of how is it that your DE&I initiatives align with your organization's future goals. And if that hasn't been thought about in terms of what the organization may look like in 5, 10, 15, and even 20 years, then you're selling yourself short. And I believe that one of the things to do to truly think about that, beyond developing a statement, for instance, but really infusing it in all of the organization's operations, whether that starts with thinking about from, I would say from an operational or management perspective, think about how you have infused in DEI principles in your employee handbook. I mentioned remote work in my previous answer, but I also believe DEI is important to think about as a lot of associations have shifted with their employees being remote or hybrid. What does that look like for your organization, your culture? Because that needs to be defined through that perspective as well, because everyone is going to be impacted differently. So secondly, I would say think about it in infusing it into association operations, whether that engaged with how do you recruit high-level volunteers? What does it look like in terms of the turnaround time on that? For instance, I think a lot of our organizations for so long have worked in this mindset of, for instance, hypothetically, to get on the board, you have to serve at a chapter level if you have chapters for X number of years. And then you need to serve maybe at another regional level for X number of years. And then you've earned the ability to be on the board. I think all of that has been flipped on its head. And truly, embracing particular DEI principles will help escalate those that have a lot to contribute for the organization's progress to be in those leadership seats, that you don't have to go through all these barriers to get there. And I think as we think about how we dismantle that, that will be important for everyone involved.
Yeah, I think that one of the things those who are negative towards the whole idea has really seized on in a wrong way is the numbers game. They say, well, it's all we're doing is dividing up, how many people we have here. It's a percent of this or something like that. They're not thinking about it the way you really mentioned, which is the real inclusiveness and acceptance of what our society's becoming. And it's unfortunate that in our society we have to fight that, but we have to fight it in our associations too. This numbers game versus real, legitimate inclusion in the functions and the reality of the institution.
No, you're absolutely right in picking up on that, because I believe, we have an obligation in the association space to continue to elevate those that are operating in our profession and in the association as generally. And how is it that you're inviting more people to the table if you're not identifying what may be the issues that are pertinent to them? And those issues, as we are continually to develop in our world, is changing, and the world is getting even smaller, per se, when you think about how you infuse technology in that. And so it's important, I believe, to think about how we account for all of that. And that falls under, the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. One of the things that we implemented, certainly here at A1, to kind of help turn down the volume on maybe some of the pushback, was that we've actually renamed it. It's now, under the nomenclature of accountability, belonging, and culture. Now, that's in a way to kind of dismantle that hostile takeover of the DEI terminology. But at the end of the day, we're reframing that conversation so that everyone understands, yeah, I have a place here. And my perspective is not diminished because I may have grown up in, this environment and lived on this street and engaged with this type of individual only. Now I have an opportunity to really bring that forward and solve problems that are facing the industry, ensuring that it remains relevant.
And one of the things that you participated in, and I believe is really very important in terms of what the association community is doing, was your being a part of the DELP program. And first, I think it's important to explain to our audience what DELP is, because they don't all have it. And then, how associations can support the program, the people that are in the program, and how the program can be used by the association to take steps forward in promoting some of the best qualities that we think about in terms of a truly diverse, inclusive community.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning DELP. I am confident that my DELP experience, helped escalate my ability to be in the role I'm in today professionally. And so you defined it early on that it's the Diversity Executive Leadership Program, DELP through the ASAE. And I believe we're in 2024, so I want to say this will be the 24th year of the leadership program, because that's really what it is. And it was defined, and it was established in part to support individuals from underrepresented identity groups and helping them advance through the ranks of leadership in association management. So really thinking about how is it that people who certainly people of color, maybe those that are self-identified with particular disabilities, that seen or unseen, and really trying to help them hone their leadership skills to position you in a place to take on a leadership role in associations, truly getting into the C-suite, maybe not being a CEO, because everyone doesn't, I believe everyone doesn't have that drive to be in that seat, but maybe being, on the executive leadership team somewhere within the association space, and really changing the dynamics of who is in those seats. And I would say, that has been a great experience and exposure for me. I want to say when I came into the program in 2016 with the cohort of 11 other association people, we fully leaned in to our DELP experience and made a conscious decision that, we were going to say yes. We did that a lot early on. I think now I've transitioned more to leadership, as an alumnus in the program. I still say yes a lot. But there are times now where it's like, okay, I may have a capacity here where we really can't lean in here, but I'll take a call. I'll engage with people, coach others, execute those same behaviors and activities that those who came before me did for me. And so, I like to describe the DELP program for individuals that it is, you're going to get out of it what you put into it first. I think just about like anything in life. But I think the driving piece there is that the DELP program invites more less experienced association professionals, maybe those in middle management, into opportunities and doors that you probably would never be able to get into if you weren't in the program. And it's important to think about how, once you're in that space, what are you going to do to leave an impression, to make your mark, to truly represent and be positive in that experience, while at the same time thinking about who can I bring along with me? What can I make an impact on that is going to elevate associations, that will help the reputation of associations moving forward? And I think that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Well, not only were you fortunate to be a part of the program, you've obviously taken it to heart, both in terms of what you learned and now your give back, as you were just explaining, and that's greatly appreciated from the association community. I'd like to move on and talk a little bit more about volunteer engagement, which you talked about a little bit earlier. Here again, we're dealing with a new reality. You mentioned at least part of it was, remote work. I'd like to bring in this idea of the alpha generation, these people born in the 21st century, who, by the way, could be 23 or 24 years old now. That's not exactly as young as they used to be. And they're a target for most membership and volunteer activities, at least in some respect. So what do you see and think associations ought to prepare for with this new generation of 21st century individuals?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the pandemic, and this is something that's been weighing on me the past couple of weeks as I've been collaborating with some friends and colleagues. And I mentioned the importance to them in passing that associations, we've really got to lean in to mental health services. And here's the reason why I think about this. Our future colleagues, our future members that would be in this alpha generation, so many of them have earned, if they have college degrees or something, they've earned, those more recently in remote environments, isolated environments. And so how is it that we are going to recognize that and create resources around that experience in their lives as they come into their professional life? They're going to come in as professionals working on association staffs, maybe being consultants, or whereas they might be working in a profession where they then are going to be engaging with people differently. How is it that we're retooling on soft skills? How is it that we are encouraging them to take those chances to collaborate with others? Because where I'm sitting, I believe that that's a challenge that we either need to think about now in terms of how we're going to impact that moving forward. Because again, back to the remote pieces, there's still folks that are working in flexible work environments, and they're seeking flexible work arrangements. And I think all of that plays into that experience of the time. And it'll be important to develop strategies around helping to solve that. And then the second piece of that, I believe, would be thinking about how is it that we can provide for our members that are going to be in this generation, shorten, more specific volunteer experiences, because we still need that time, talent, and treasure from them, because they provide that as, beyond just being in a membership role, but they provide that context and exposure, that lived experience. So those are two areas where I believe, it's going to be imperative associations think about how to address those if we're not already working on it, and removing some of that stigma around mental health, because sometimes mental health only comes up when people get the extreme of the result of that. And at the same time, we're all potentially at times fighting something where we might need to have an additional resource to help move forward.
One of the really interesting points that you just brought up is this idea of thinking about engagement as inclusive. It sounds silly when you say it at first, simply because, well, isn't that what it means? But it isn't always what it means. But we have a very data-driven world these days. Everything's about this number, that number, how many, how much, how little, how long. Did it value us in terms of return on investment and the like? I like to think about data-driven as being an infused data-driven idea, so that some of the soft skills that you mentioned actually get utilized. When I hear people talk about what they're hiring these days, they can find people that have the academic skill. Often can't find people who can talk about it, express it, bring other people along, the whole empathy kind of thing. Do you see much of that, or how are you handling the difference between what the numbers tell us and the emotional impact that comes from belonging, engaging, and working in our world?
No, you're absolutely right on that. I certainly will agree that that piece of the fit, I think, is one way to maybe think about it too. It's not necessarily there. Again, that connection piece or that opportunity to have been able to have some failure in trial has been lacking. And so you're relying completely on what's on paper, but being able to communicate that effectively is something that is lacking. And I believe that, as senior association people, staff members, even those that work with our volunteers who may be in high level roles, such as on the board, we have an obligation to encourage that type of failure so that they can improve their confidence and in turn be willing to take calculated risks. And that's what we're not seeing right now, I believe, as a result of some of the feedback from the pandemic or some of the opportunities that people have not had previously prior to that experience that would have allowed you to say, you know what, all right, I learned this from that. I can move on. I can actually hold a conversation with someone and hold a conversation in a way to where we might not agree, but there's an opportunity for us to truly lean into that.
Yeah. I happen to hold a Maxwell Leadership Team certification. And John Maxwell wrote a book. I'm just going to give you the title of it because of what we were just talking about. The title of his book is Sometimes We Win, Sometimes We Learn. And in this world where we say we learn from failure, oftentimes when you fail, maybe you don't get a chance to learn. And that's a tough piece. I don't know what you see, in the association world there, but we always talk about you learn from failure. But do we really give people that opportunity?
Yeah, it's grace, right? Whether or not you're extending that grace to be able to do that. My philosophy, and I don't own this, but I'll take some credit for it as learning from some mentors, and that is if you're going to fail, fail fast, and as a result of that, recognize what that is, and understand that when you do that, make sure you are communicating that appropriately to those that are in your orbit. So for me, it would be, reporting to the CEO, and let's make sure we rectify a way forward. And I think sometimes people spend time trying to cover up versus saying, okay, yeah, I made this mistake. Here's what I learned from it. Let's identify, the appropriate steps forward to implement what's going to change. And I think, extending a little grace is so important, particularly, again, based on where we are in our current society, in the fact that, we have so many who refuse to even have a critical conversation when you can't agree on the facts.
Yeah, well, people who look like me have a hard time having that conversation because we never had it. We don't know it. I think one of the real advantages, we were talking a little bit earlier about the alpha generation, is their relationships with a much more diverse world are going to help. The speed at which it occurs might be another issue. Well, Rick, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciated the insights you provided to the community. And if someone wants to reach you, what's the best way of them getting a hold of you?
Yeah, the best way to get a hold of me, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So, easily searched Rick Burt, B-U-R-T, at CAE. And we're going to cut that. Rick Burt, CAE on LinkedIn.
You got it, Rick. And again, my thanks to you for joining me today and being a part of our podcast. It's been It's been a great experience for me, and I wish you much continued success in your work. For those of you, my friends, who come to us on a regular basis, remember Associations Futures is intended to be a forward-thinking podcast that delves into the future of associations. Our mission, in short, is to help associations navigate an ever-evolving landscape by anticipating trends, avoiding short-sighted decisions, and encouraging long-term success. Tune in again in 2 weeks, and I hope that you'll gain insights, foresight, and actionable strategies for your association's journey. See you soon.